Thank you for joining us and joining Navigating Change, a four-part webinar series focused on sustainable recovery for small businesses, brought to you by Bank of the West, Protect Our Winters, and Snowsports Industries America. My name is Dan Ossobo from Bank of the West, and I'm proud of the series we've put together. We hope you'll join us for the next few weeks as we look to highlight trends and present practical improvements for small businesses in the wake of the pandemic. COVID has redefined how we do business, and new opportunities are emerging for how businesses can adapt to survive now and even flourish in the future. Today's topic is extremely timely and relevant: the values and sense of a sustainable recovery. Before we jump in, I'd like to just cover some small housekeeping items. All video and audio of attendees will be muted throughout the webinar, and the Q&A will be live as well, and the moderator will pull in those questions and utilize them in, say, the last 10 minutes or so of the program. And now for some quick introductions for today's program. Our moderator is good friend and skiing legend Chris Davenport, and the panelists are Laura Hill, Director of Client Development, NPD Group; Mario Molina, Executive Director, Protect Our Winters; Nick Sargent, President, Snowsports Industries America; and Ben Stuart, Chief Marketing Officer, Bank of the West. Over to you, Chris, and have a great conversation.
Great, thanks, Dan. Welcome to all of our panelists. Thank you for joining today, the second in a series, the four-part series, Navigating Change. Really excited to be talking with and getting some great insights and talking to some people that have a lot of experience in what's going on with small businesses around the country. This pandemic obviously has derailed a lot of industries and a lot of businesses, but there's also been some trends that have, accelerated in a positive way for others in the outdoor industry. So today, what we want to do is try to bring together some sort of learnings, some shared beliefs, touch on a lot of things that are working well within the economy and in the outdoor industry and beyond. So with that said, let's start. I wanted to start with you, Mario, and I'm glad we've got Ben on now. Ben, you got your technical difficulties taken care of. So Mario, we were actually on a call earlier today and discussing some things with Protect Our Winters. It was actually a POW board call, which I'm a member of the board of directors of POW. But POW, Protect Our Winters, has been doing some really interesting research going back years, but especially this year. What have you guys learned as an organization most recently in terms of the demographics of outdoor enthusiasts and how those shared values perhaps are sort of coming to light in this day and age?
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris, and thanks so much for Bank of the West for putting this on. So in reference to the study you're mentioning, in 2019, we conducted a research study across 3,100 participants of outdoor sports across the country. And from that research, we wanted to understand what motivates people to participate in an outdoor sports lifestyle, but also what motivates them to engage in causes, particularly for us, obviously, sustainability and climate change. And what we found out is that almost 80% of participants surveyed said that they cared and were concerned about climate change. And that crossed that crossed groups across sports. So snow sports, mountain biking, trail sports, trail running, climbing, etc. And it also cut across demographics in terms of age distribution and political affiliation. And so what was really interesting for us was to see that, the concern is incredibly high. A total of about 81% of participants say that they're very concerned about climate change and that they actually see businesses as part of the solution. So 47% of the participants that we interviewed, that we surveyed, said they actually see brands and businesses as a big part of the solution. And about 30% of them actually look to business to inspire them and motivate them forward, businesses that they follow in the outdoor industry. So for us, what that really highlighted is that brand affinity and brand loyalty are very closely tied to the relationship that the consumer and the customer has with the values that they see those brands reflecting.
Yeah, that's great. I see that myself just as a consumer. I definitely look to brands that share my exact same values. And where can the folks that are on our webinar today get more information about this research and other the other work that Protect Our Winters is doing, Mario?
Definitely. So we have an executive summary of that report available online at protectourwinters.org/resources. And maybe Corey, if you can throw that up in the chat, I would appreciate it. And we have conversations about this topic as well on our stream channel. So I encourage everyone to go and check it out.
Great, thanks. I'm making a note of that myself. Laura, let's go to you and talk a little bit about the work that the NPD group does. You guys provide insights into a whole range of consumer trends and the general landscape of the economy. I was on the NPD website. It's extremely robust. There's a lot of information on there. During the pandemic, consumers have had to make a lot of changes, just the way we go about our daily lives. But how much do we know about how their values have changed? Of course, it's not so easy to just walk into a retail location like we used to, but is there big changes going on in the way people perceive shopping, perceive retail, perceive small business and other values?
Yes, Chris, and thank you guys for having me. I'm really happy to be here. So firstly, I think the changing consumption behaviors that we've seen over the last 4 to 5 months really are a reflection of what consumers are valuing most. Specifically in these uncertain times, purchases have fallen most dramatically and been the slowest to recover in categories like apparel, footwear, and accessories, because so many of us aren't dressing for the office or for special occasions, and instead we're really prioritizing spending on the goods that emphasize comfort, health and wellness, fitness, time outdoors, and then specifically time spent with family. So we've really cemented as consumers the need and certainly the benefit of being outdoors, and we see this in a wide array of the categories that are experiencing growth during the pandemic. So let me share a couple points of data with you. For instance, the channel of independent bike dealers and cycling has grown more than 50% year to date over last year. And they've added over $1 billion with a B, new dollars to the industry. While all segments are growing, the largest that we're seeing in volume are mountain, transit, and then specifically kids segments. We also see it in true performance running shoes. So those for the past 5 to 10 years really fell out of favor as consumers' preference shifted towards inspired by styles and, took a more casual approach to sport. And then as athleisure as a fashion trend continued to grow. But consumers are really getting back to running, and no surprise they're making those purchases online. So NPD tracks the sports specialty e-commerce channel separately. And that channel registered a 78% growth in dollars sold in running shoes just between the months of March and May. And we've of course seen it in fitness equipment and accessories. Consumers look to not only continue their workouts at home, but as many reported to us in our survey data, that they were starting new fitness programs while being stuck at home in quarantine. So again, because the pandemic has brought about a renewed focus and value on health and wellness, NPD's tracking of the fitness equipment sales, we showed a growth of 115%
Wow.
since March when the shutdowns began. So pretty incredible. And then lastly, the outdoor industry which a lot of us are most familiar with has certainly seen growth across categories that support both, time spent outside in the backyard, so grilling and fuel, as well as in outdoor recreation categories like kayaking and camping. So for instance, rec kayaks added 27 million new dollars to the industry just last month. So based on those consumption behaviors, consumers really are telling us that they value being active outside, they value health and wellness, and they value time spent with their family. So to tag on to that, so secondly, consumers have also been telling us for some time that they want to buy from brands and retailers that align with their values. So whether it's sustainability, support for social causes, or just the love of the outdoors and snow sports, now more than ever, brands and retailers really do themselves a disservice if they're not communicating both actively and authentically with their audiences what their brand purpose and what their brand stands for, so that consumers can find them on that and then align with them, particularly, in this time when we're seeing so much social change.
Wow, that's fantastic. I love hearing about all the statistics. It backs up what I'm seeing here in Colorado in the outdoors. Just trailheads are full and people are out biking, and getting in touch with the outdoors is really great. I wanted to ask all of the panelists actually, as you introduce yourselves, to just touch on very briefly what sustainable recovery means to you. What does that look like? So Laura, why don't you just take that quick question, then we'll move on to Nick as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's been top of mind for NPD across the organization, and for me, related to industry recovery and more specifically, sustainable recovery, is creating even closer partnerships with our brands and our retailers, and utilizing all of NPD's assets from consumer to POS data, so that our partners can better understand what's happening in their markets, how they can better navigate, through this crisis, navigate their business through this crisis. Everyone's sort of feeling their way through the dark right now. And we're finding that businesses are really hungry for data to affirm their decisions and to identify what new opportunities are out there.
Nick, let's go to you, because you work very closely as the president of Snowsports Industries of America with Laura and the NPD group, getting all of this data. What are you hearing from, I'll let you introduce yourself and discuss quickly what sustainable recovery looks like from your perspective, but then I also want to hear what you are hearing from your members. And unmute yourself there. We all make that mistake.
All right, back into the varsity program here. So we're seeing a lot, we're hearing a lot, and obviously we work with NPD to help educate our members. SIA is a 65-year-old trade organization that represents the wholesale business for the winter sport and winter outdoor industry here in North America and around the world. So you can imagine through the shutdown in March, April, we heard a lot from our members with a lot of the unknown and uncertainty which was ahead of us. The good news is, and what Laura really supported with those numbers, is that we're seeing a huge increase in our constituents that want to be outside and want to participate in sports. And as you two mentioned, Chris, here in Park City and in other parts of Utah and the West and the East, this new exploration of the outdoors is I hate to say catching on, but when you take something away from someone, they want it that much more. And when we're all sitting at home quarantined, the only thing we want to do is get outside and participate. So we're seeing that in those increases. But really, what we're hearing and what we're seeing is that the consumer really wants to know that they're going to be in a safe environment to not only shop for their favorite gear, go look for it. We're seeing a lot of retailers move to direct to consumer, bolstering their website. They're also moving to pickup, curbside pickup, which is going to be the new norm for us moving forward. But really, the other part of this, and this is what we're seeing now with the spikes in COVID in a lot of our favorite areas, is that we have to remain vigilant and we have to continue to operate in a safe capacity if we want to flatten this curve. I just read 2 articles this morning, one by Aspen Co's CEO Mike Kaplan and Vail Resort CEO Rob Katz, and their common theme was safety and vigilance. So those are 2 things that we're going to have to really stand behind and support. Beyond that, we really have to work with our consumer in managing their expectation, not just through communication, but through the actions that these consumers are going to experience when it does get cold and we do want to participate outdoor. What are those rules? What are those regulations? What's going to happen at resort? And the common answer right now is nobody knows. This is uncharted territory. But everyone's paying attention and everyone's building contingency plans and everyone's looking for opportunity to create that fun experience that we all love. It's going to be different, but if you're patient and you're staying vigilant and safe, I think we're going to get through this and we'll get back to a normal space, but it might not be till 21 or 22.
Yeah, I mean, you said it right there. Things are going to be different, and so that's really what this webinar series is all about: is how do we adapt? How do we build resiliency for the future by looking at our businesses in different ways? And Ben, now let's go to you and discuss what's going on at Bank of the West. First off, I'll let you introduce yourself and talk about what a sustainable recovery looks like from your perspective.
I think a big part of sustainable recovery is just doing things differently than before. I think, to build off what Laura said, in the month of April, we saw 139% increase in social media mentions of sustainability. And that's in a viral pandemic. And so we saw sustainability really spike across the country as a theme. And so I think that as we go back and as we deal with a completely new normal, and I think today is what a pretty tough day to have this webinar when we see GDPs contracted at the largest rate in US history. We're all sitting here, and as important as the PPP program was, it's probably not going to be a situation where we spray the money hose at this problem and it goes away. I think we're going to have to do things differently. I think we'll probably touch on some of this later, but I think collaboration, partnerships, doing things in mass and in coordination with other constituents is really what's going to be so important to get ourselves out of the situation that we're in.
And speaking of doing things differently, you and your team at Bank of the West just launched a really exciting, first of its kind new product, this 1% for the Planet checking account, of which I am a account holder, giving 1% of the revenue to environmental causes, which is just really cool. So the more that I dug into this, the more impressed I was at how many companies you had to work with to bring this idea to life. It's obviously not that easy. So can you kind of give us a little sneak peek under the hood in terms of who was involved and how it all sort of added up to create this new product that otherwise might not exist?
Yeah, to speaking of partnerships, at its core, it's a checking account, and we think it's a pretty good one. It's got nice mobile features, all that kind of stuff. But in order to make it what it was, we had to partner. We had to partner with 1% for the Planet. We had to partner with Duconomy, which is the world's leading carbon tracking algorithm in the world. And that's another neat, unique feature of this, is not only does it give 1% back to environmental causes at no cost to the customer, but it also allows you to track the carbon impact of your purchases. And that could only happen through Duconomy. We as a bank, we don't have that kind of capability. And then obviously incredibly proud that the 1% give back is going to our friends at Protect Our Winters. But even the card itself is a biodegradable plastic, and we had to partner with a company called Ballot in order to make that happen. And it was only through the unique mix of those four partners did this thing come out as something that is, beneficial and worthwhile to the marketplace. It is all about partnerships and all about looking at things a little bit differently. So.
It's interesting that you mentioned that the topic of this discussion is the values and cents, CENTS, of a sustainable recovery. Was this product, the 1% for the Planet checking account, was it an idea that came out of needing to pivot in this pandemic time, or was it something that had kind of been on the table for a while for you guys? I mean, we're all trying to learn lessons that can help our small businesses. Was this something that was just a product of creative thinking due to having to pivot during the pandemic?
No, I'd be cool if it was, and I'd make myself a little smarter looking, but no, this is a classic case of preparation meets opportunity equals luck. I think this was something that Kate Williams and I have been talking about for a year. Kate Williams at 1% for the Planet. And, as we decided that we were going to do it and build a 1% branded product, we just said, well, if it's going to be that, it can't just be a checking account. And there's no way in hell we're going to have virgin plastic debit cards being shipped all over the country. And if it's going to do that, then it's got to have a carbon calculating capability to raise people's awareness of the impact of their purchases and their connection to sustainable finance. So no, we had it in the works for a while, but again, from a luck perspective and all the information that Laura talked about, now more than ever, something like this is more relevant and more desirable in the situation that we're in.
We will have our one of our moderators put up the link to the Bank of the West 1% for the Planet account info in the chat right there. Once again, I just wanted to thank all of our participants, everybody that's here watching. Mario, let's pivot over to you now, because Ben just talked about the importance of partners, partnering up in this day and age to seek out resiliency, seek out success. And that's been a big part of POW's success, Protect Our Winners, over the years, whether it's Patagonia or Burton or Cliff Bar, or working with Bank of the West. What are a few things that you found that make such alliances, I guess, successful? What are those essential ingredients, if you will?
Yeah. So there are the pieces that are the strategic combinations, right? So we look for partners both in the finance world. Bank of the West is our first partner, and in the renewable energy world, because we need those systemic solutions at large scale to be adopted and deployed rapidly, and if we're going to address climate change. But then we also look for cultural partners. So who are the cultural influencers in the outdoor space that can actually help translate some of the technicalities around this to an audience that to our consumer audience. And then obviously we're looking for, we look for partners in the political and policy realm. And we believe that it's the combination of those three realms that makes the work that we're doing really effective and powerful. But ultimately, that's the theory. I think ultimately it gets down to the individuals and the passions that individuals have across all of these, all these sectors. Our most successful partnerships are those that are aligned on values, people who really truly value their experiences outdoors, who realize that the legacy that we leave to future generations is more important than necessarily the bottom line for the next quarter, or exactly like whether we're Republicans or Democrats, that we're all aligned on this love for the land, and that we realize that that is the number one thing and the most important thing that we can be doing across, with the tools that we have, whether they be business, whether they be a nonprofit, whether they be communications. And so when you have those two things, as very specific area of expertise, an audience with a very specific audience, and values alignment with the individuals, that's when I think we have really powerful partnerships like the one that we've been developing and working on with Bank of the West.
I would invite all of you to jump in and comment if you'd like on the value of partnerships. Nick, with SIA, are you seeing this perhaps happening more and more, where brands or retailers or companies are deciding to kind of get together to build resiliency or to be stronger?
We're seeing it across the board, and it's no new action for us. In one regard, but it's a very new topic in another. We've seen consolidation. We've seen a lot of different groups working together to solve different problems. But this is a whole another area that we need more help in. And so we're seeing a lot of our industry leadership starting to address this conversation, looking for more ways to get behind it, get active. But more importantly, how do they bring their brand up to speed? A lot of these brands haven't been as quick to jump on this, but they are now, and they're really making a huge effort. And I think with more partnership and more conversation, it's only going to help. But we still have a long way to go. We're just scratching the surface on what's possible, and it's conversations like this, and it's partners like POW and Bank of the West that are really helping make a big difference. But again, here we are, panelists. We need to get another 600 people and companies and leadership behind this. Huge impact.
Yeah, Mario.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, thanks. And if I can piggyback off that, and Nick, you and I haven't talked about this for a while, but I completely agree. And something else that's come out of that came out of the research that we did last year is the importance of meeting our audiences and our consumers where they're at. And giving them actions and giving them ways to get involved that are in that are along the same lines. And so, we've understood, we've come to better understand that we can't start by asking people to show up at Capitol Hill and lobby their lawmakers, but maybe we start by sharing a social post and get more educated on the issue. And there's a journey, there's an engagement journey for the consumer, and I think that it's the same thing for a lot of our brands. One of the main questions that became really salient in the research was that people sometimes don't even know where to start. And so how do I start engaging in this topic? Like how do I start about it? And so, a lot of the product that came out and that's available for, in that same report is, how do we start that conversation with our consumers, but also as a brand, where do we start, talking about our own actions and not being scared about the fact that maybe our product isn't perfect, or maybe the experience isn't carbon neutral, etc. But it's, here's what I can do now, and this is where we want to go, and this is our intention of where we want to end up. And we've had a similar conversation with Ben about Bank of the West and the importance of taking what action we can now and laying out intentions and a timeline for future engagement, rather than being scared to engage in the conversation right off the bat because we're worried about what imperfections there might be.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Mario. And Laura and Ben, maybe you two can take this next one, which is just what examples are you seeing out there in either your own industry or the industries that you're following of businesses getting creative to succeed, whether it's through the partnerships that Nick and Mario just discussed, or other ways.
Yeah, and if I can take that first, if you don't mind, Ben.
Sure.
And Chris, I first want to tag on real quick to what Mario was speaking about not waiting for the product to be perfect and to really take that first step. Some of NPD's survey data shows that consumers really they care what the brands and retailers are doing, but they don't always know who to buy from and why. And so shouting it from the mountaintop and letting consumers know what you're doing, whether it's perfected or not, is really important, so that consumers can find those products and they can support you for those. So just tagging that on, that consumers want to know, and sometimes they have a hard time finding it and a hard time understanding it. So, but to your point, who's doing it well and who's doing well right now? And from my industry, who I'd like to point to is Outdoor Research. They're a small brand or a medium brand, I should say, in the outdoor industry, primarily in apparel. And apparel, as I mentioned before, has been really one of the hardest hit industries during the pandemic. But back in March, they made a lightning fast move to convert their Seattle warehouse and manufacturing into PPE. They partnered, so back to partnerships, they partnered with Filson on some of that. And now they've developed that into, a full-scale product that they have at market. It's made out of antimicrobial fabric. It has an insert for filters. It's actually sold out on their website right now. So I know that they're working really hard just to keep up with the demand that they've created from bringing that product to market, and really just responding to a demand that we needed as a society to respond to the pandemic and support our frontline workers. So that's one of the brands, at least out of the outdoor industry, that I really like to highlight right now for that.
That's a great example. Thanks for that, Laura. Ben, on to you. What are some shining examples of businesses getting creative that you've seen?
The one that stands out is just is a local restaurateur. It's a guy who's I'm in Mill Valley and north of San Francisco, and there's a guy that owns a couple restaurants. And very early on in the pandemic, he partnered with Feed the Front Lines, and so that his restaurant stayed open, but also had a cooperative with Feed the Front Lines to feed healthcare workers and things like that. And just kind of an example of a simple partnership that just made people prefer to eat and get takeout from his restaurant group as opposed to others. So I thought that was a nice, simple way to attach yourself to the issue at hand and be part of the solution. Second, obviously, I think field motion biking has kind of exploded. I'll be honest, I bought a bike, a new bike right at the start of this. And the bike shop has been incredible in terms of picking up, delivering, doing service appointments. So sort of going out of their way, their trucks have been on the road a little bit more, taking things back and forth to the bike shop and being pretty responsive when things aren't right. They're very good about it. And then second, I just, again, going back to shopping your values, we're just seeing an increase of folks who said, look, I'm going to start doing businesses. I'm going to start doing business with the companies who are part of the solution, not part of the problem. And it's not just values based, but they actually see a connection between some of the systemic issues facing the health of our planet and the purchases they make every day. And we're seeing, material percentage shifts in customers who are voting with their wallets, voting with their behaviors every single day.
I just want to remind all the participants that we will be taking some questions. You can actually, at the bottom of your screen, type a question into your Q&A, and we will, or I will, read those questions out to our panel here in a little bit. One more question for the group, though, and Nick, we'll start with you. As we head into or get close to the winter sports season, and you mentioned earlier that you were just reading letters from Aspen Snowmass CEO Mike Kaplan and Vail Resort CEO Rob Katz. Everybody's thinking about this, multi-billion-dollar industry of winter sports. What's it going to look like? And we don't really know. But what advice or guidance could you give small business owners as they prepare to sort of shift from summer business to winter business?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it's one that we're working on with our members every day here. It's, there's a great opportunity in front of us. Never before in this industry have we had a chance to pause, take a really strong look at the way the business has been run, and really decide where we want to be as an industry for the next generation of consumers and leaders. And so we're working hard to help our members really look at their business and really dissect that model to make sure it's sustainable and it's going to carry them through the next amount of time. But we have to also exercise patience in this. Nothing's going to happen overnight. We have a big trade show in January every year. Like a lot of trade shows, everything is being threatened. So what does that mean for your business if you can't go to a trade show? As an example, this is a good time if you're not pointing your brand into a digital solution. This is a good time to do that. If you can't get out to see your retailers as a supplier or a rep, digital solutions are a great way to do that. We're seeing that across the board. And we're seeing a lot of companies make really hard decisions on how they want to spend that marketing dollar to be sustainable with those specialty retailers as a way to reach these consumers.
Great. Laura, you mentioned earlier a really interesting sort of case study with Outdoor Research, a small or medium-sized apparel brand that pivoted quickly and stayed busy. What is the NPD group, your company, seeing in terms of trends maybe outside of the outdoor industry of successful pivots, if you will? Anything else come to mind?
Yeah, there were several examples of brands that were doing exactly what Outdoor Research did. Mm-hmm. A couple from within the industry. Crocs, I know, they made a big change. They were giving away footwear to frontline workers. New Balance switched and they started doing some PPE manufacturing. Salomon changed their innovation center in Annecy and started making PPE out of that as well. So several examples from within our industry, but then you also saw ones in, beauty and perfume where they were taking their bottling manufacturing and using it to create hand sanitizer and putting that out to market. So I think at the time there were several examples of manufacturers that were really, stepping up to do their part.
I think to both of Nick and Laura, to your point, one of the things that come out of this, Nick, you mentioned digital solutions. Laura, you mentioned pivoting to PPE and other things like that, is companies are having to look at their own business and see how sustainable it is, whether it's just in their manufacturing or their supply chains, whatever it might be. So Mario, this is a question for you. How does Protect Our Winters see sustainability as an asset in this current environment?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things. One is the strategic long-term view. While we are all in the midst of the pandemic and we're hopeful that we'll be coming out of it in 2021, looking at 2022, the reality is that when it comes to climate change and the climate impacts on the outdoor industry, there's a lot of uncertainty ahead of us, and there's a lot of variability ahead of us. And so it'll become increasingly difficult to continue to plan for business as usual, particularly in winter sports, as we have less predictability of the winter season, from the amount of snowpack to first and last snowfall. So, starting to think really through, like, what does the strategic adaptation to uncertainty in climate over the next 5 and 10 years for the industry look like, as an integrated part of business planning, not just as an add-on to marketing or messaging. I think is really critical, and getting that as embedded into our decision-making culture. But then on the plus side as well, going back to customer loyalty and brand loyalty, I think that what we'll see is that consumers who see brands stepping up in areas of whether it's social justice or health, responsible health management and sustainability, those are the customers that will stick with brands and companies through thick and thin. And those are the customers that will return, and when they have to make a choice between purchasing a product, if they can only make a choice between purchasing one product versus 2 or 3 products, they will purchase a product from the brand that they feel is most aligned with their values. Or when they go back in 2021 and they go back to more or less normal consumer spending, that they'll remember which brands have been the ones that have, that even in the midst of crisis, have actually stood and messaged their values that align with their own.
Yeah, well said. One of the things that came out of it, just for me personally, is in thinking about my family and my own values. I looked at my banking, and this is going to come over to Ben from Bank of the West, and I realized that the bank that I had my mortgage with was one of the largest funders of fossil fuel industry and dirty fossil fuel projects, and I was sort of shocked by that and decided to pull my mortgage away from them. And actually it's with Bank of the West now, so for transparency's sake. Ben, thanks for that. Ben, so who comes out ahead in this market? I mean, we've heard some really great sort of lessons and tips for small businesses. What are you seeing in your big industry, the banking industry? Who comes out ahead? Who wins in this tough climate?
God, I don't know if I'm good enough to foreshadow there. I'm going to go backwards if you don't mind. I want to address say a couple things that have sort of we've seen work in terms of the environment in which we're working, and then maybe I'll try and be Nostradamus here and see if I can predict the future. I doubt it. The one thing, and I'm going to talk about 2 things that seem really weird, but they've been incredibly standout effective in terms of us both internally and externally dealing with this. And one, believe it or not, was wellness calls to our clients. And I know that might be difficult from a retail perspective, but actually just reaching out and calling them and say, hey, how are you doing? Are you all right? What we found is that we were one of the very few banks that were actually calling customers and just checking in on them. And the response we got was just overwhelmingly positive. And so I would say one thing on the external front was doing that. And then on the other side of that coin internally, is we've been spending a lot of time dealing with doing mental health check-ins with our employees. And again, the response from our employees that we're really checking in on them and providing resources, because again, I think one of the things that we found is that everyone's having a very different experience in this, and that you're going to have some employees who are they're coping just fine, they're biking, they're running, they're losing weight, they've got COVID project. You got other people who are alone and don't have social interaction. So I would say for the business owners, and I know it's not applicable necessarily, but I think knowing that checking in on your employees' mental health, and then actually just having the guts to kind of call some of your key customers and call some of the folks that you interact with every day and check in on them. Those simple motions yielded a tremendous amount of goodwill, and were actually productive both on the personal side and on the business side.
That's a great practical solution, or that's very, very helpful for, I know, a lot of our participants today. So thanks for that, Ben. And one more question for you, and this came from a participant. A lot of small businesses struggled with the PPP process. Can you speak at a high level about what your bank or banking in general anticipates?
Yeah, this I was very close to this. And first, I think the context here was, it was essentially overnight. The government said, we're offering a brand new type of loan, and it's going to be available in 24 hours. And every single bank was like, well, wait a second, we've done small business administration loans before, but the loans don't look like this. They don't have the qualifications like this. And I spoke to so many angry customers every day, frustrated with the process, the opaqueness of the process. And I read the Twitter feeds for every major bank, and it looked like it was pretty universally awful for everybody. But in the end, I think, we were estimating that only a small fraction of businesses were actually going to get their loans. We were estimating at the bank that we were probably only going to get a third of our applicants funded. We ended up getting 90% of our applicants funded, and the ones that weren't were, thrown out for some other reason. And, I think to this day, there's still $100 million left in the second round of funding. So I guess I'm kind of apologizing on the industry for what a horrible process it was, but it does look like they may offer more, because I think a lot of people got scared of the application process. They got scared of the rules. And then they heard that the process was so nightmarish that they said, I don't want to deal with that. And so I do think, just as there's going to be a second round of stimulus checks, there is thinking that there'll be another round of funding. The current thinking is that it's going to happen around the election for political reasons. Obviously, that they're going to release money close to that for small businesses. But I can say, after touching base with a lot of other banks, is that the process is going to get a lot better this third time around. I don't know if that answers the question directly, but that would be that. So if there's a follow-up question, I'm happy to answer it. I just want to make sure I'm addressing the question at hand.
Yeah, no, I think that was great. Those are some very, very good insights. And if there is a follow-up question from one of our participants, just post that on the Q&A. Laura, we had a question for you. Do you have any advice for local businesses that support the environment, but a local business that supports the environment, but doesn't have brand recognition to connect with consumers? Interesting question. So it could be something that's not a big, broadly known consumer brand, but wants to connect.
Absolutely. So I would first tag on to what both Ben and Mario spoke to in terms of partnerships. Who can you partner with that it would be mutually beneficial, that you can grow that recognition? And then also, what assets do you have at hand that you can leverage more heavily? Is it newsletter? Is it blog? Is it social media? Do you have a social media manager? Don't be shy about what you're doing. It doesn't behoove you to be modest in this case. Get out there and shout it from the mountaintop. The reason that Patagonia is synonymous with environmental justice is because they're a marketing machine. And you don't have to have their marketing budget, just start with what you have at hand and maximize it to its most potential.
That's a great answer. Thanks for that. And Nick, this is actually a nice segue to two questions that we got about supply chains. Any advice for small businesses with large suppliers, but they want to still make their supply chain more sustainable and climate friendly? We had two questions about that. Can you touch on the supply chain issue? Yeah,
there's a lot of opportunity and options for brands that want to look at their supply chain and really understand how sustainable it is from an environmental perspective, but also from a product management perspective. And SA can help make those introductions to any brand that is looking for that. But we've had a lot of our members go through that, specifically when I was at Burton Snowsports, and getting all of our factories Blue Sign compatible and making sure that the factories we're operating in a safe and healthy manner, both for the environment, but for the employees. And I can talk about this for a long time, but I'll speak quick. But we can help you with that. And give us a call, and we can make those introductions if you'd like.
Thanks for that, Nick. There's also some good information being posted in the chat with some links for outdoor brands that can join Climate Action Corps. There's the 2 articles that you referenced, Nick, were posted in there, as is some information for Protect Our Winters and their research. Couple more questions here. The supply chain one was really good, and we saw a few of those. For businesses just struggling to get through this economic downturn, any advice on how they might incorporate sustainability? Let's go back to just talking about sustainability as a word and what it means to you, because is it sustainability in terms of environmental impact or climate, or is it sustainability in terms of the economic success? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at sustainability here. Laura, do you want to start? Or actually, Mario, let's go to you and talk about what sustainability really means to you.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Thanks. I think it's a matter of time frames, right? Like, what's the strategic horizon for the industry? What's the strategic horizon for the business? And if we're talking about sustainability in the short term, I think some of the advice that Nick provided is spot on. Like, how do we look at moving to digital and curbside pickup and some of those tactical decisions that'll help the business survive? But for us, obviously, we're really focused on climate change and what does mid and long-term sustainability, not only for our industry but really for our sports themselves, look like. And for us, that really comes down to emissions, and that really comes down to how can the voice of the outdoor industry be heard in its full power? There are 50 million people who identify as outdoor enthusiasts in the country. And if we were able to actually bring all of them together with climate change and climate mitigation and climate smart policies as the #1 priority, we would be far more influential than any other group lobbying the government right now, as well as being able to drive those really long-term systemic changes. So I think it's a coupled strategy of organizing as a policy and political force, bringing together our consumers and our businesses, but it's also learning the most that we can about what are those practices that are going to be required to adapt to a changing climate, and how are we going to adapt the business practices, and how are we going to adapt consumer culture to the changes in climate. I think Altera Mountain Company is an example of a company that's really embedded that variability in the future into their business model by offering multiple destinations, because we no longer will be able to predict exactly what does a winter season look like for one particular resort. So again, to the point that Ben made earlier, like, we will become more resilient and more sustainable if we partner together from a business perspective. But if we're really concerned with the sustainability of the industry, the sport, and ultimately, not to be cliche, but the planet, we really have to address those large-scale systemic shifts that will mitigate the worst impacts of climate change.
It's an excellent answer, Mario. I'm glad we're recording this, because I need to go back and just kind of soak up everything you just said. That was really well said. Laura, how about you on the sustainability front?
I completely agree with what you just said about Mario's answer. I'll be doing the same. So I think sustainability as environmental and as sustainable business, I think very much go hand in hand, just from what we see in our survey data as how important sustainability is to our consumers, and that they want to know what businesses are doing and be able to support that. So I think the two are very much connected. Sustainability in terms of what small businesses can do is really just start looking around you. What vendors are you working with, and where are you buying your cleaning supplies from, and things of that nature. And do you have an electric car charging station in your parking lot? Things like that are maybe less obvious to your consumers, and then on the other hand, can be more obvious, can certainly support that sustainable business piece of the recovery as well.
Okay, Ben, I'll let you touch on sustainability, and if we have some more questions from the participants, please post those on the Q&A. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, and I think at the risk of being a little wonkish, you know, if you go and you look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, there's 17 of them. And I think it's really, I think it's really important to understand what sustainability means in the broadest context. I think it's really easy to go to environment and climate change and things like that, but poverty. We're not going to have a sustainable recovery if we have widespread poverty. We're not going to have a sustainable recovery if we don't have gender equity and inclusion and diversity, if we don't have education. And so I think that when you take a broad look at sustainability, and I'm just touching on a couple of them out of the 17, and I don't necessarily think we need to go onto all of them, but I think it's really important to understand from a true sustainable recovery and in order to have your business sustained from a business perspective, there are a lot of things that need to come along with that. And I think that business owners can sort of attach themselves to different aspects of sustainability and don't necessarily need to go just to the environment. I personally believe, and I know Mario, I think if you ask a lot of people, I think, you know, how we create energy as a species and the carbon impact of the globe's energy grid is a huge part of that, and likely the most important. But I think it's important to note that there are a lot of things that need to come in place to be sustainable. And so I think businesses should have a pretty expansive view, because depending on their ownership, depending on their constituents, depending on the business there, and I think there are places within the sustainability continuum where people can play that aren't just purely climate or the environment. I think there are other things that are critically important as well.
Well said by everybody there. Thank you for touching on that. As we get close to wrapping up our webinar here today, I just wanted to ask you for some final thoughts for small businesses out there, the participants, and we've had a great group following the webinar today. Any last thoughts? Nick, do you want to start it off?
Yeah, sure. I think I really like what Ben, you just said. You know, sustainability comes in so many different spaces, and however we look at it. You know, we're taking a deep dive at our industry's DEI initiatives right now, and we're pushing that hard to help grow our industry to others around the world that want to participate. I think that's really important. I also think that the change that we're embarking on through COVID and is going to be a big change for this industry. So I'm going to go back to being patient. Working together to communicate and really practice safety.
Thank you, Nick. Ben, why don't we jump over to you, because I know you have to jump off here in a little bit.
Well, first, let me preface it by saying, you know, I've worked in marketing a long time, and so many small businesses and people I know in small, they've all come to me and they've always said, well, Ben, you know marketing, you know, tell me what to do. And almost inevitably, small business owners know so much more and so much better about how to market their business than any knucklehead like me could ever say. So I'll preface it with that. And then my next part of the answer is going to be completely unscientific and completely based on my own experience in this crisis. I think the one thing that I found in terms of the businesses that I've dealt with for the last 4 months, the ones that I've been really drawn and really attracted to have been the ones that have just been endlessly optimistic and friendly. Not the ones that come across as shell-shocked and depressed. And I've been drawn to the businesses that have been almost effervescent in their ability to attract you and smile through the mask and ignore the hand sanitizer. I'm not saying shirk the rules. I'm saying that people that just saw through that and acted through that. You tended to seek out those businesses because there's so much bad news and there's so much depressing crap that we're all dealing with every day. I tended to kind of seek out the businesses that were rays of light and hope and optimism, as opposed to those that were sort of reflecting the bad news that we get every day. So very unscientific, but my 2 cents.
I couldn't agree more. Positivity is such a strong force, and you nailed it right there. Laura.
So I would like to leave you guys with a couple last pieces of data, since I am a numbers girl. In NPD survey data, a third of consumers report that brand or retailer's social position is extremely or very important to their purchase decision making, and that gets even higher when you talk about Gen Z and millennials, who are the largest cohorts, the largest generations in our country, and whose spending power is growing every day. That figure looks even larger, and half of them tell us that they actually choose not to purchase from brands or retailers based on those positions. So it's really important, what you're doing out there, and that you tell consumers about it.
I agree. I was speaking to a former owner of a large retail chain here in Colorado a couple of days ago, and he told me, Chris, going forward, companies that stand for something are the companies that are going to succeed. So we all have to ask ourselves what we stand for. With that in mind, Mario, some final thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think everything's been said really eloquently, but I guess just to tag on, I don't remember who said the quote, but that the character of a person not during the good times, but during the bad times, or something to that effect, during difficult times. And I think this is the time. This is the time to lead with values. This is the time to stand up for what, as a business, as a brand, do you believe in? Because it will be, once we get past through these dark times, people will remember who stood up when it wasn't easy to do it. And the thing is, you don't have to do it alone. There's so many resources, so many partners out there, from Protect Our Winters to the OIA Climate Group to the SIA Climate Group, depending on which angle you want to take, that can help both with supply chain, sustainability, with marketing, with messaging, with advocacy initiatives. There's so many resources out there. And one of the reasons I think it's such a great idea to put this group together is that even those on this call are here because we reach out to businesses and brands and help start or continue on this journey. So this is a time for us all to stand for what we believe in, and it will be remembered by those of us in the industry and our consumers.
Yeah, well said, Mario. And to all of you, Laura Hills from the NPD group, Ben Stuart from Bank of the West, Nick Sargent from SIA, and Mario Molina, thank you all so much. This has been really interesting. I've learned a lot, and I'm going to go back and rewatch this. Remember, it is recorded. It will be posted at sustainablerecovery.us. And with that, I want to thank all of our panelists and wrap it up and remind all of you that we will be doing another one next week for webinar number 3 in the Navigating Change webinar series. I'll be moderating again. I'll be joined by some great guests from evo.com, from Avalon, and from REI. This session is titled Sustainable Operations Equals Sustainable Recovery. So moving forward with that theme, and we'll be talking about what businesses like yours can do to integrate more sustainability into their operations. So again, you can register for this web series at sustainablerecovery.us. And with that, I'm Chris Davenport. I will see you here next week. Thank you guys very much for participating, and have a great day.